The coffee maker in our break room sounded like a dying whale, and honestly, it matched how I felt every morning walking into TechFlow Solutions. My name is Rick Carter, and I'd been grinding away as a software developer for 3 years, watching my computer science degree gather dust while my boss treated me like I majored in finger painting. That Tuesday started like any other. Me arriving at 7:30 a.m. to debug code that someone else broke, while Kevin Walsh rolled in at 10 a.m. with his third espresso and zero accountability. Kevin was the kind of guy who thought Synergy was a programming language and machine learning meant teaching the printer to work. But he had the corner office, the company car, and the ability to make my life miserable with a single email. I should have seen the storm coming when he scheduled that client meeting for Thursday. The same meeting where everything would finally explode in the most beautiful way possible. Kevin had this habit of taking credit for anything that worked and blaming me for anything that didn't. Last month, when the Johnson account loved our new database optimization, suddenly Kevin was a database wizard in the company newsletter. When the Peterson project crashed because Kevin insisted on cutting corners, guess whose inexperience got mentioned in the incident report? I kept my mouth shut because I needed this job. Student loans don't pay themselves, and my tiny apartment wasn't getting any cheaper. But I was working on something special in my spare time. A revolutionary inventory management system that could transform how small businesses track their products. I'd been coding it for 8 months, staying up until 2 a.m. most nights, fueled by energy drinks and spite. It was my masterpiece, my ticket out of this corporate hell. Kevin knew I was working on something big, but he had no idea what it actually did. That ignorance would be his downfall. The Blackstone Industries meeting was supposed to be our biggest pitch of the year. They were a mid-sized manufacturing company looking for a complete digital overhaul, and Kevin had been kissing up to their CEO, Victoria Blackstone, for months. He'd promised her cutting-edge solutions and innovative technology that would revolutionize her business. The problem? Kevin couldn't code his way out of a paper bag if someone gave him the GitHub repository and a step-by-step tutorial. He was depending entirely on me to make his big promises come true. For weeks, he'd been asking me about my little side project, hinting that maybe it could be useful for the Blackstone presentation. I kept telling him it wasn't ready yet, which was technically true. It wasn't ready because I'd been deliberately keeping the final piece unfinished. Call it insurance, call it paranoia, but something told me to hold back that last crucial component. Smart move, considering what happened next. Monday morning, Kevin called me into his office with that fake smile he wore when he wanted something. His corner office had more plants than a botanical garden and motivational posters that probably cost more than my monthly salary. "Rick, buddy," he said, leaning back in his leather chair like he was doing me a favor by breathing the same air. "I need you to walk me through that inventory system you've been tinkering with. Blackstone Industries is going to love it." I explained that it wasn't finished yet, that there were still critical bugs to work out. His smile faltered. "Well, how long until it's ready?" he asked, drumming his manicured fingers on his glass desk. "Hard to say," I replied honestly. "Could be weeks, maybe months. The integration protocols are really complex." Kevin's face darkened. "Months? Rick, we're presenting Thursday. I already told Victoria it was ready." And there it was. The moment I realized he'd been selling something he didn't own and didn't understand. "Look," Kevin said, standing up and pacing behind his desk like a caged animal. "I don't care if it's perfect. Just make it work well enough for the demo. We'll fix the bugs later." I stared at him. "Kevin, this isn't some simple app. If the integration protocols aren't solid, the whole system could crash during the presentation. Or worse, it could corrupt their existing data." He waved his hand dismissively. "You're overthinking it. That's your problem, Rick. Too much analysis, not enough action. Sometimes you just have to trust the process." Trust the process. Right. The process where he took credit for my work while I got blamed for his shortcuts. "I need more time," I insisted. Kevin stopped pacing and gave me that look, the one that said he was about to remind me who signed my paychecks. "Time is what we don't have. Make it work, Rick. That's what I pay you for." As I walked back to my desk, a dangerous idea started forming in my mind. Tuesday and Wednesday blurred together in a haze of forced coding sessions and Kevin's increasingly frantic check-ins. He'd hover over my shoulder, asking questions that proved he understood nothing about what I was building. "Can you make the interface more blue?" he'd ask while I was debugging database connections. Victoria loves blue. Or my personal favorite, add some artificial intelligence to it. Everyone loves AI these days. I nodded and pretended to take notes while internally screaming. The beautiful thing about software development is that it looks like magic to people who don't understand it. Kevin saw me typing rapidly and assumed I was making progress. In reality, I was just documenting all the unfinished pieces, creating a detailed roadmap of everything that would break during the demonstration. By Wednesday evening, I had a perfect map of failure. The system would boot up beautifully, show some impressive graphs and charts, but the moment anyone tried to actually use it, everything would crumble like a house of cards in an earthquake. Thursday morning arrived with the kind of gray, drizzly weather that matched my mood perfectly. I got to the office early and did one final check of my incomplete masterpiece. The user interface looked stunning, clean, modern, exactly what a corporate executive would want to see. But underneath that pretty facade, critical functions were missing. The real-time sync feature? Unfinished. The data backup protocols? Half-coded. The error handling that would prevent crashes? Completely absent. It was like a movie set, impressive from the front, but step behind the facade and you'd find nothing but wooden scaffolding and empty space. Kevin burst into the office at 9:15, his usual lateness amplified by pre-presentation jitters. "Is it ready?" he demanded, not even bothering with good morning. I looked up from my computer with the most innocent expression I could manage. "Well, it's as ready as it's going to be with the time we had." He missed the careful wording completely, too focused on his own anxiety to notice mine was entirely absent. The Blackstone Industries team arrived at 2 p.m. sharp. Victoria Blackstone was exactly what you'd expect from a successful CEO. Perfectly pressed suit, firm handshake, eyes that missed nothing. She brought along her CTO, Marcus Webb, and their head of operations, Diana Foster. These weren't people you could impress with buzzwords and fancy charts. They knew their business inside and out, and they'd ask real questions that demanded real answers. Kevin greeted them in the lobby wearing his most expensive suit and that politician smile he practiced in the mirror. "Victoria, so wonderful to see you again. Are you ready to see the future of inventory management?" As we walked to the conference room, I caught Diana Foster studying me with curious eyes. "You're the developer behind this system?" she asked quietly. I nodded. "What's your background?" "Computer science degree from State University," I replied. Kevin, overhearing, let out that condescending laugh I'd grown to hate. "Oh, Rick is being modest," Kevin said, his voice dripping with fake friendliness. "State University, right? Great school for." "Well, for getting the basics down." The Blackstone team looked confused by his tone, but Kevin was just getting started. As we settled into the conference room, he continued, "You know how these young developers are? Lots of theoretical knowledge from their little computer science programs, but sometimes they struggle with real-world applications." Victoria raised an eyebrow. "Are you saying your developer isn't qualified?" Kevin backpedaled quickly, but the damage was already expanding. No, Rick is perfectly competent for basic coding tasks. It's just that this system we're showing you today, this required real industry experience, strategic thinking. That's where my business expertise came in." I sat there, watching him dig his own grave with every word. Marcus Webb, the CTO, was now looking at Kevin with barely concealed skepticism. "So who actually built the system?" he asked directly. Kevin puffed up like a peacock. "Well, it was really a collaborative effort, but the vision, the architecture, the innovation, that all came from me." The lies kept flowing like water from a broken pipe. Kevin launched into his prepared presentation, clicking through slides he'd clearly memorized but didn't understand. "Our proprietary algorithm uses advanced machine learning to predict inventory needs," he said confidently, while I sat there knowing full well there was no algorithm at all, just some basic database queries I'd thrown together. Victoria leaned forward, interested despite Kevin's earlier comments about my qualifications. "Can you explain how the machine learning component works?" Kevin's smile flickered for just a moment. "Well, it's quite technical. Rick here handles all the coding details while I focus on the big picture strategy." Translation: he had no idea. Diana Foster caught the dodge immediately. "We'd love to hear from Rick then. After all, if we're investing in this system, we need to understand the technical foundation." All eyes turned to me. This was the moment of truth. I could save Kevin's presentation, explain the system honestly, and watch him take credit once again. Or I could let him hang himself with his own rope. Kevin shot me a warning look that said, "Don't embarrass me in front of these clients." Too late for that, Kevin. I smiled politely and opened my laptop. "I'd be happy to show you the system in action," I said, connecting to the projector. The interface loaded beautifully, all sleek graphs and professional layouts. Kevin visibly relaxed, probably thinking I was going to save his skin despite his public humiliation of me. "As you can see," I began, "the dashboard provides a comprehensive overview of inventory levels, supplier information, and predictive analytics." Victoria nodded approvingly. "Impressive interface. Can you show us how it handles real-time inventory updates?" This was where the fun began. I clicked on the inventory update function and watched the system immediately throw an error message. Red text filled the screen. "Critical error. Sync protocols not found." Kevin's face went pale. That's just a minor bug," he stammered. "Right, Rick? Can you fix that quickly?" I shrugged apologetically. "Actually, the real-time sync feature isn't implemented yet. It's one of those components that needs more development time." Marcus Webb leaned forward with interest. "What other features aren't implemented?" The question hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. Kevin's eyes pleaded with me to lie, to cover for him, to save his presentation and his reputation. Instead, I decided to give our potential clients exactly what they deserved, the truth. "Well," I said, pulling up my development notes, "the backup systems aren't finished, so any data corruption could be permanent. The error handling is incomplete, which means crashes are likely. And the security protocols." I paused for effect. "Let's just say they need significant work before this could handle sensitive business data." Victoria's expression shifted from interested to concerned. "Mr. Walsh, you presented this as a finished product ready for immediate implementation." Kevin was sweating now, his expensive suit looking less impressive by the second. "There might be some minor tweaks needed, but the core functionality is solid." I couldn't let that slide. "Actually, Kevin, remember yesterday when you asked me to trust the process and push forward despite my concerns about system stability?" His eyes widened in horror as he realized I was about to throw him under the bus he'd been driving straight at me. "The truth is," I continued, addressing the Blackstone team directly, "this system is nowhere near ready for commercial deployment. I've been working on it for months, but there are fundamental architectural issues that need to be resolved before it could safely handle real business operations." Diana Foster pulled out her notebook and started writing. "Not a good sign for Kevin. How long would you estimate until it's actually ready?" she asked. I pretended to consider the question carefully. "With proper development time and testing? At least 6 months, maybe more. These aren't simple bug fixes. We're talking about core functionality that was never completed." Kevin finally found his voice again. "Rick is being overly cautious. We could have this ready much sooner with the right motivation." The word motivation came out with enough venom to kill a small animal. Victoria stood up slowly, her business smile replaced by something much colder. "Mr. Walsh, are you suggesting that your developer is lying about the system's capabilities?" Kevin realized he'd backed himself into a corner with no escape route. "No, of course not. I just think Rick is being too perfectionist about minor details." Marcus Webb closed his laptop with a decisive snap. "These don't sound like minor details to me. Data corruption, security vulnerabilities, system crashes. These are fundamental failures." He looked directly at me, bypassing Kevin entirely. "Rick, in your professional opinion, what would it take to make this system actually viable?" I appreciated that he'd asked for my professional opinion, the same professional opinion that Kevin had mocked an hour earlier. "Honestly, we need to rebuild the core architecture from the ground up. The current foundation is unstable because—" I paused, choosing my words carefully, "because certain strategic decisions prioritize speed over reliability." Kevin's face was now the color of a ripe tomato. "Strategic decisions I made," he said defensively, not realizing he'd just admitted to creating the problems I was describing. Victoria exchanged a meaningful look with her colleagues. "Mr. Walsh, when you promised us a revolutionary system, did you actually verify that it worked?" The question landed like a physical blow. Kevin opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again, apparently realizing that any answer would make him look worse. The silence stretched until Diana Foster finally spoke. "We appreciate your time, But clearly this isn't what we were led to expect. She stood up, gathering her materials with the efficiency of someone who'd just dodged a bullet. We'll need to reconsider our options. Kevin went into full panic mode. Wait, please. We can have this fixed in 2 weeks, maybe 3. Rick just needs to focus and stop overthinking every little detail. He shot me another look, this one pure desperation mixed with anger. Victoria paused at the door. Mr. Walsh, the problem isn't your developer's attention to detail. The problem is that you sold us a product that doesn't exist. Her words hit Kevin like a sledgehammer. And frankly, your comments about Rick's qualifications were quite telling. If someone with a computer science degree isn't qualified to build software systems, perhaps you should reconsider who you're hiring. Marcus Webb nodded in agreement. Especially since Rick seems to be the only one in this room who actually understands what the system does and doesn't do. They filed out of the conference room, leaving Kevin and me alone with the wreckage of his presentation. The door clicked shut, and Kevin exploded like a faulty pressure cooker. What the hell was that, Rick? You just sabotaged the biggest deal of the year. I remained calm, closing my laptop with deliberate slowness. I told the truth about the system's capabilities. Isn't that what good employees are supposed to do? Kevin slammed his hand on the conference table. You could have covered for the bugs. We could have fixed them after the contract was signed. The admission hung between us like a confession at a murder trial. So your plan was to lie to clients about a broken product and hope we could fix it later? I asked quietly. That's not lying. That's strategic positioning. Kevin was pacing now, his carefully styled hair disheveled from running his hands through it. You don't understand business, Rick. Sometimes you have to oversell to get the deal, then figure out the details later. I stood up slowly, feeling strangely calm despite the storm raging in front of me. And sometimes, Kevin, the details matter. Especially when you're asking people to trust their entire business to a system that could crash and burn at any moment. Kevin stopped pacing and stared at me with a mixture of rage and disbelief. You planned this, didn't you? You deliberately sabotaged the presentation to make me look bad. I couldn't help but smile slightly. Kevin, I didn't make you promise clients a finished product that didn't exist. I didn't make you mock my degree in front of them. And I certainly didn't make you admit that you prioritize speed over reliability. His face went through several color changes as the implications sank in. You're fired, he said finally, his voice shaking with anger. Clear out your desk and get out. I nodded calmly. I figured as much. But before I go, there's something you should know about that system you just lost the Blackstone deal over. Kevin's eyes narrowed suspiciously. What? I pulled out my phone and showed him my screen. I got a text from Victoria Blackstone about 10 minutes ago. She wants to discuss hiring me directly as an independent contractor to build a proper inventory management system for them. The blood drained from Kevin's face so fast I thought he might faint. She what? Apparently. I continued, enjoying every second of Kevin's shock. She was impressed by my honesty and technical knowledge. Funny how being truthful about system limitations makes you seem more trustworthy, not less. Kevin grabbed the edge of the conference table for support. You can't do that. You'd be stealing our client. I laughed, actually laughed out loud. Kevin, you just lost that client by lying to them. They walked out of here with zero intention of working with TechFlow Solutions ever again. I started walking toward the door, then paused. Oh, and about that non-compete clause in my employment contract? It only applies to products developed using company resources. Since I built the inventory system entirely on my own time, using my own equipment, it's completely mine. Kevin's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. But you used company insights. Industry knowledge. I shook my head. Nope. I used my computer science degree. You know, that worthless piece of paper you mocked in front of our clients. Turns out it actually taught me how to build software systems. Who would have thought? The next week was a whirlwind of karma coming full circle. I met with Victoria and her team at a coffee shop downtown, where they treated me like the professional Kevin never acknowledged me to be. We were frankly appalled by how your former boss spoke about your qualifications, Victoria said over her latte. Anyone who dismisses formal education in computer science while trying to sell software solutions doesn't understand the industry at all. Marcus Webb nodded enthusiastically. Your honesty about the system's limitations showed real integrity. In our experience, Developers who admit when something isn't ready are the ones you can actually trust with mission-critical projects. They offered me a 6-month contract worth more than I'd made in 2 years at TechFlow, not just to build the inventory system properly, but to consult on their entire digital infrastructure overhaul. One question, Diana Foster said with a slight smile. How long will it really take to build a working version of that system? I grinned back. About 2 weeks. The core functionality has been finished for months. I just kept the integration protocol separate as insurance against exactly what happened in that conference room. While I was signing contracts and planning my new independent career, Kevin was dealing with the fallout from the Blackstone disaster. Word travels fast in our industry, and Kevin's reputation took a nosedive faster than a broken elevator. Apparently, Victoria had mentioned the incident to other business leaders in their network, describing how TechFlow had tried to sell them a non-functional product while mocking their own developers' qualifications. By the end of the week, 2 other major clients had canceled their contracts with TechFlow, citing concerns about the company's integrity and technical competence. Kevin tried to reach out to me several times, leaving increasingly desperate voicemails. Rick, we need to talk. Maybe we can work something out. I think there was a misunderstanding about your role in the company. Translation. He needed me to clean up the mess he'd created. I didn't return his calls. Some bridges are worth burning, and this one had been soaked in gasoline for months. Instead, I focused on building the future I'd been dreaming about since my first day in Kevin's digital sweatshop. The Blackstone project launched 3 weeks later, ahead of schedule and under budget. The system worked flawlessly, handling everything from real-time inventory tracking to predictive ordering algorithms. Victoria sent me a bottle of champagne with a note to proper software development and the value of honest expertise. Marcus Webb recommended me to 3 other companies, all looking for someone who understood both the technical and business sides of digital transformation. Diana Foster asked me to speak at their upcoming industry conference about the importance of integrity in tech consulting. Meanwhile, Kevin's company was struggling to stay afloat. Without the Blackstone contract and with their reputation in tatters, TechFlow was bleeding money and talent. I heard through former colleagues that Kevin had been forced to lay off half the development team and was considering selling the company entirely. The irony wasn't lost on me. The man who dismissed my computer science degree was now watching his business empire crumble because he'd alienated the one person who actually knew how to build the products he'd been selling. 6 months after that disastrous presentation, I was running my own consulting firm with 4 employees and more clients than I could handle. The best part? Every single one of my team members had strong technical backgrounds and formal education in computer science or related fields. We specialized in honest assessment of client needs, realistic timelines, and systems that actually worked as advertised. Revolutionary concepts, apparently. One afternoon, I got a call from an unknown number. Rick? This is Kevin. I was wondering if we could meet for coffee. I have a business proposition for you. I almost hung up immediately, but curiosity got the better of me. What kind of proposition, Kevin? His voice sounded different, humbler, defeated. TechFlow is struggling. We need someone who can actually deliver on the promises we've been making. I was thinking maybe you could consult for us, help us rebuild our reputation. The audacity was breathtaking. Let me get this straight, I said slowly. You want to hire the person whose degree you mocked and whose work you dismissed to save the company you've been running into the ground. There was a long pause. I may have been overly critical of your background. I'm willing to admit that now. I met Kevin at the same coffee shop where I'd signed my first contract with Victoria Blackstone. He looked older, more worn down, like someone who'd been carrying a weight too heavy for his shoulders. I made mistakes, he said without preamble. I should have valued your expertise more. I should have listened to your concerns about rushing the presentation. It was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever heard from him, but it was too little, too late. Kevin, I said, stirring my coffee thoughtfully. The problem wasn't just that you didn't value my expertise. The problem was that you actively undermined it while depending on it to make your promises come true. He nodded miserably. I know. And now I'm paying the price. 3 more clients canceled this month. The board is talking about replacing me as CEO. I felt a moment of something that might have been pity, but it passed quickly. What exactly are you asking me to do? Kevin leaned forward desperately. Come back. As a partner, not an employee. We can split the ownership 60 to 40. You handle all the technical decisions. I'll focus on business development. It was a generous offer, financially speaking. It was also completely out of the question. I appreciate the offer, I said, meaning it despite everything. But I'm not interested in rebuilding TechFlow. Kevin's face fell. Why not? We could be successful together. You have the technical skills, I have the business connections. I shook my head. Kevin, your business connections are exactly the problem. Every client you brought in was sold on promises you couldn't keep. My reputation would be destroyed within 6 months trying to clean up that mess. He sat back in his chair, defeated. So what am I supposed to do? The company is dying. I finished my coffee and stood up. You could try hiring people whose qualifications you actually respect, listening to their professional opinions, and selling only what you can actually deliver. As I walked away, he called after me one last time. Rick, what if I gave you 70% ownership? Full control of all technical decisions. I turned back with a slight smile. Kevin, you still don't get it. This isn't about money or control. This is about respect. And you can't buy that back with equity percentages. I left him sitting there, staring into his empty coffee cup, finally understanding what it felt like to be dismissed and undervalued. A year later, my consulting firm had grown to 12 employees in an office in the financial district. We were known throughout the industry for our honest assessments, reliable delivery, and refusal to oversell our capabilities. Every new client got the same speech. We'll tell you what we can build, how long it will really take, and what it will actually cost. No surprises, no shortcuts, no promises we can't keep. It was a radical approach that somehow worked incredibly well. TechFlow Solutions closed its doors 6 months after my coffee meeting with Kevin. The final nail in the coffin was a lawsuit from a client who discovered that a revolutionary AI system Kevin had sold them was actually just a series of if-then statements written by an intern. Kevin moved to another city and got a job in sales at a company that sold actual physical products, things he couldn't accidentally oversell or underdeliver. I heard he was doing well there, apparently having learned the value of understanding what you're selling before you sell it. Sometimes I wondered if I should feel bad about how everything turned out. Then I remembered that presentation, his condescending laughter, and his dismissal of the education that had made everything I'd accomplished possible. Some lessons are worth the price, even when that price is an entire career.